Welcome back to the Photo Banter podcast. I'm your host, Alex Gagne, and on today's podcast, I speak with photo art director Karen Williams. Karen earned her MFA in photography at the Savannah College of Art and Design and has worked with publications and brands such as AARP, AirBnB, San Francisco Magazine, Square, and also Masterclass, to name a few. In this interview, I speak to Karen about her experience working with magazines, as well as with big tech brands, and what goes into producing commercial photography work. Karen also gives advice to photographers who are trying to market their work to editors and producers. And lastly, I also speak to Karen about some of her photographic influences, as well as one of her personal photo projects titled Elegant Wasteland. Karen is someone who brings a wealth of knowledge and experience in the photography industry, so I was excited to get a chance to speak with her about her journey with photography. So I hope you enjoy, and thanks so much for listening. All right, Karen Williams, welcome to the podcast. Excited to talk to you. I think we linked up on LinkedIn. That's where I found you, and was excited to talk to you because you've worked in a lot of different areas in the business, magazines, with the brands, everything. So really excited to talk to you. And I had to give you a shout out. Mad props on the LinkedIn game. Like you're always posting if there's a job, like you posted one today. So I really appreciate it because I think like just sharing that stuff and letting people know the jobs are out there. So hats off to that.
No, thank you for having me. I'm excited. Just so everyone you've interviewed. So I feel honored and humbled. And yeah, I want to just continue just to give back and whatever kind of knowledge I can, someone can take from me. I am more than happy to share that.
Definitely. And I guess like how obviously been a crazy year with the pandemic and everything. How have you been doing? It looks like you just started a new job, but how's it kind of been working and kind of producing shoots? How's the last year kind of been for you, I guess?
It's been I'm fortunate. I've been blessed. I've been able to continue to work, but grateful for before the pandemic, working at Callisto Media, we were already doing kind of like Zoom offsite shoots. So, and remote shooting. And so moving to Square, going there when they were transitioning, when people were on set, I was like, oh, I've been doing this for a while, like even before COVID. So I've been fortunate enough where I was almost like set up for what was going to happen.
Yeah.
But definitely shoots have been difficult because, got to take in quarantine days. Like for the photographers, you have limited people on set, and just making sure everyone has what they need.
Yeah, definitely. And how's the remote shoot thing been going? Like, are there remote shoots that you guys are doing? Because I know talking to a lot of photographers, some people are like legit doing remote shoots where the photographer doesn't go anywhere. Then there's like remote shoots where there is a crew and then the client is on one side. What's kind of been your experience with the remote shoots you guys have been doing?
Again, been fortunate enough to be working with awesome photographers that are on set, and then literally either G Meet link or Zoom link, and I'm just looking at like a live feed from the Digitech, and yeah, I've been able to photo art direct. I miss it. It made me appreciate being on set because sometimes these are long days, but it's just it's just those little things like just move the business card, just no too much. Like if I was there, it's just make it so much easier. But fortunate enough, I've been able to interact with the photographer and be able just to give live live updates. And yeah.
And do you think the remote shoot is something it is going to, even after the pandemic, when it hopefully ends, like, do you think this is like technology that you think brands and clients are going to continue to use where like so-and-so like creative director can't show up this shoot and there's going to keep using this? Or what do you think kind of going into the future? Like no one really knows, but I'd be interested in kind of getting your perspective.
I think like going back to the office, it's going to be a hybrid. Like for when you have a subject and like, hey, I'm like in the Bahamas and you can't send a photographer there, that's where you're going to implement it. But if you're shooting locally or you can fly there easily and get a crew there, I think you will be a back on set. I think that's what I want to be back on set, but understand like if somewhere in Russia in the tundra, we can't have, there's limit, access. then I think it's a good thing that we are flexing our muscles in this remote environment and to be able to take on and remote art direct.
And is that being kind of like the photographers you're working with and hiring? Is that kind of like a new asset you're looking for when hiring people? Like, hey, do you have the technology to execute the recent remote shoots? Is that something you think photographers are gonna have to kind of have in their toolkit kind of moving forward? Do you think?
I think, yeah, they're going to have that in their cool toolkit because you just never know now.
Yep.
And because, again, for me, I've gotten used to this flexibility of like working from home. So sub talent might be like, hey, can you come to me? Or I don't want to go to a studio necessarily. Can you meet me here? And or maybe I don't want to have people here. Can you shoot me remote like what you did last year? So I think just having that flexibility, definitely having it in your toolkit will definitely be an asset for the photographer going forward in the future.
Yeah, definitely. And I was excited. It looks like you just started a new job with Masterclass, really great platform with lots of really informative videos and content. And hats off to you. Finding a job anytime is hard, but finding one in a pandemic, like that's a tough task. How did that kind of come about for you? And I guess it's only been a month, I think, for you, but how's it kind of been working for you?
So for Masterclass, I was fortunate enough, I'm filling in right now temp for paternity leave. So
Got it.
just having this opportunity to be able to move and be able to, again, learn different skill sets as I feel from every part of my job. Yeah, it's been, like I said, I've been blessed during this pandemic to be able to continue to work and find projects to continue to go.
No, it's exciting. I know from talking to like a lot of my producer friends who have been in this business for a while, it kind of seems like the art producer role, a lot more people are kind of working that way, kind of going from project based rather than working for like one company directly. Cause like I know even in Boston, like some of the big agencies like Arnold or Hill Holiday, like back in the day, like 10 years ago, they'd have like 4 or 5 art producers on staff. But now it seems like it's kind of more project based and art producers almost kind of working the way freelance photographers do. It kind of seems right.
Yeah, and I think it's just evolved. My background is in editorial. So when I started like 10, 12 years ago, a long time ago, I mean, the mindset is you join a magazine and you're there for 20 years. And that's what's the case when I first started at Southern Living. I had people were there for 30 years. Like
Yeah.
that's like, or people, nowadays after like 2008 and just the cuts and, I think, and unfortunately our field, the one thing it makes you sad is some people don't want to pay the value. Like they know they want photography and they think, oh, I can just go to Google search or I can get an Instagram and maybe you get lucky once, but no, it's a skill and you do need good photography because people look at the visual at the end of the day. And if it looks like crappy, what is that saying about your brand?
Yep.
So I think just the evolution of just kind of how the creative has gone, it's more fluid and more, and not saying there are full-time jobs there, but I think there's a lot more out there if you're transitioning on working more as a freelance and to be more consistent.
Yeah.
And not just like, I've gone too much, but usually I think their jobs are there.
Definitely. And you feel like is that like part of your job, kind of like kind of explaining to clients why you should shoot like actually make original photography versus like stock?
Yes. First, you have more control. I always like say, if you put up the money and get the value and shoot a good photographer, you will see that value returned in your business, and you get to control what is seen and from your company versus, again, there's a lot of good stock photography out there, but you didn't create that.
Yeah.
And you have the opportunity to create something and own it right out.
Yeah.
Because necessarily you don't own stock all the time.
Yeah, you want that photo to jump off the page and get people's attention. And then I'm glad people are fighting for it. I'm glad to hear that, But I guess to go back, I was just kind of curious, like where you grew up and like how did you kind of first kind of discover photography, I guess?
So I am a Army brat. So born in San Diego, but grew up a little bit of everywhere. But I always consider my home base Texas.
Okay.
Now Nevada, because that's where my parents have retired to. And I fell into photography as being the family photographer. So if you ever go and ever can look at my family albums, you won't see me. because
Okay.
I'm the one taking the photo. Like only I knew how the copper, put the frame together and stuff like that. And it wasn't until my senior year in high school, I took a photography class and I was like, oh, I like this. It was just a simple black and white. And then I went on to get my BFA and MFA in photography from there.
That's
Didn't
awesome.
think I was going to go into the field of producing and photo art directing at the time. But yeah, that was kind of the start of it.
That's great. And like when where did you go to school and where you majored in photography and like what kind of stuff were you shooting even back in like college, I guess?
Oh, wow. So for my BFA, I went to St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas, because I was scared of UT. I
Why is
think
that?
because of this TV of, oh, I'm going to be in this big hall of like over 100 people and I'm going to get lost. And St. Edward's was this small, now it's bigger, but it was small. Like there was 12 people in my class.
Oh wow.
And because UT, they were starting to phase out in the like mid 2000s, the wet dark room, and they were going digital.
Mm-hmm.
And St. Edward still had a wet lab. I didn't even start really digital until like my senior year there. And then didn't know quite what I wanted to do. So went to pursue my MFA at Savannah College Art and Design. I
Wow.
think the only thing I knew is like, I'm going to be a fine art, artist, and I'm going to make all this money. That was, yeah. But I was drawn to, personally for me, I think kind of my photo heroes was, my favorites is definitely Walker Evans, Gordon Parks, William Eggleston, Stephen Shore, Lee Freelander, just like all the oldies, the goodies for me. And I fell into shooting more urban landscapes. And I did my thesis, and I really loved shooting abandoned buildings as well. And just the beauty but also the wastefulness of it. And so that's kind of and that's what I do kind of with my own personal work. I like to just be able to pick up the camera and go, and never the large format. I appreciate like alternative process, all that good stuff. But I just don't have the patience, by the 4x5 camera. I'm like, okay, I got to set this all up and then go in a dark room and then put the film in, that was like, no, I could just pick up a 35, roll the camera, like the film in, and then go and shoot. And that's what I like to pick, go up the pick and go and go.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, I'm there with you. Like I grew up shooting film. I was shooting like slide film and had a little dark room in my basement growing up. But now it's like mad props to the people shooting film now. There is definitely like a resurgence. But now when I think going back to like this, the amount of time, and it's so expensive now, like shooting film and processing it. But I'm glad I learned it. But it is I'm with you. This stick with digital so good now. Like it's this like speed and you can just keep it moving,
Yeah, who would have known? Like when it was like doing film was like relatively cheaper than digital when it was, first starting out. I mean, I still miss Photoshop 1 and 2. I resisted so long for the cloud. I resisted. I was like,
You're like, I'm not paying the subscription.
I feel like, no, I just want to buy it and to be able to, I'll upgrade when I feel like upgrading.
No.
But now it's just like everything's been thrown into digital, where it makes it relatively cheap. But now like film is like, you get those things are like, I'll shoot one roll, and it's like this is shift of going from taking your time to really think out what you're shooting to now I can just shoot like 10,000 frames really cheap, and and then I'll find like 1 out of 1,000, and then shifting your mindset to be like, oh, this is kind of slow.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's definitely different. And like going to SCAD, how's your experience there? Because that's like such a legendary school. I've like walked through it. I remember going to like they have like a college like art store where they sell like
Mhm.
artwork and stuff, and it was like incredible. But I guess like what would you say to like what was your kind of experience going to school for photography? Do you look back at it as like a useful experience, or what do you kind of remember about it, I guess?
I definitely like, for people who pick up the photography and just learn it on your own, that is mad props. And that's one, I think learning on the job is one tool, like is great to do. I always appreciate going to school and being fortunate enough to be able to afford to go to school to learn the history of it.
Yep.
And just know like more technical aspects of it, even though I'm not like a photographer by trade, but just being able to talk the language and just know the technicals and know how to do it. So for SCAD, I was fortunate enough where the first year for the grad school was 2 years. For the first year, I was in the Savannah campus, and Savannah was gorgeous, beautiful. But for me, I'm a city like rat. And it was like, wow, this is really boring now. This is such a touristy town. But I always remember my fond memory of the 45-hour review. So when you're getting halfway point, and I remember when I first started and the 45-year review was going, I think it put the fear in God in me because I would see people crying because they did not pass.
It's 40. What is
People,
the 45-hour review? What is that?
So you're halfway. So your degree, you get it's like a 90-hour degree, like the credits. And so 45 is half.
Got it.
So that's when you're like, this is what I want to do my thesis on. That you're midway, this is your final thesis that you're going to present, in your, last class. And so you go in front of the teachers and you have to defend your work, basically. You're saying, and you either pass or fail because they're like, okay, this is viable. This is, you know what you're doing, you know what you're talking about, or you fail, like this is kind of thin, it's not really thought out.
Yep.
And so, your teacher's your friend until you're at that 45-hour review.
Dun, dun, dun.
I would see people like, and it freaked me out because I was like, I cannot afford to not. Like, I can't be here 3 years. Like, I can't, no. And so I always remember that. So when I went to the Atlanta campus at the time, it was just open for a year. So everything was like new and it was nice. And it was such a different vibe. I just remember I made sure for that thesis presentation, I made sure I knew what I was talking about and I passed. Not everyone that day passed, but I passed. But I loved the professors. I loved everyone I'd met. I loved that I just continued to learn on my craft and skill.
Mm-hmm.
I think the one problem about school is they don't teach you really the fundamentals of how do you live as an artist, the business side.
Yep.
That's what they need to be telling you. It's, for everyone coming up, it's like, what do I charge? What, you have to kind of learn on the fly. And a lot of people don't want to tell you this information, but that's the one thing I wish I just had to learn as I was working.
Yeah, that's like 99% I was just having this conversation with my friend the other day. We're like, dude, we're professional photographers, but taking pictures is like 5% of the job. It's like, and especially this year, like it's been extremely hard to navigate, like how to market your work. And I was interested to talk to you about this is like, before it was like a lot of my work, I'd go meet with photo editors, art producers, go whatever, New York or wherever city and show your book. But obviously now people aren't in the office. I was just kind of curious, have you still been doing meetings with photographers like via Zoom to look at work, or like how's that kind of been working for you?
So I have met with photographers on Zoom to look at work a little bit, but mostly it's because of COVID and stuff like that. It's for me, in my experience, a lot of times I'll just to find new work or to find interest, like who photography, I'm just going to Instagram.
Got it.
For me, it's like Instagram. It's like, if you keep that up to date, I'll reach out to you or try to find, who I need to reach out to you. So that's what I've missed, because when I started at San Francisco Magazine, I moved from DC to San Francisco, didn't know that many people. And I just made meetings with people who wanted to, and we just discussed work. And even if I didn't end up working with them, I'm like, if you have any questions, or if you want me to review anything, I am here and available, because I just feel like, I'm here to give back. I can give you all the knowledge I can, give, from my experience, because I know it's tough, because, editors are busy in general, but I love that connection and just, being a part of the community and just, being able to help however I can. But I will say one thing I wish photographers would do more consistently.
All right, great. This is great. This is what we're here for.
Okay, this is put your location on your website.
I put it on my Instagram and website, all that.
But photographers, not all photographers do that. And
Yeah.
I can tell you an insider view, a lot of places we have to hire locally because of budgets. And we need to know if you're in LA or New York, or you can shoot both, you know what I mean? Like trying to find, a lot of photographers are not very consistent. So I would say for number one, kind of like pet peeve of me, it's like when I go and I find work and I'm like, love it. And I don't see, and then I have to hunt it down. And I'm like, darn, you're not here, or you said you were here and now you're here.
Yep.
It's like, put your location of where you are, because it helps us out. So we're not, first of all, wasting time, but we can, even if you're not in a like location, you have dope work, then we can just literally just, like what I do is bookmark, and then boom, this person's located here.
Oh, that, yeah.
But
location, that's the name of the bit.
It will
location,
help,
location.
Then it helps me like, oh, you are located. Boom, that makes it easier for me to present you to whoever I need to get approval to. I'm like, oh, this person's located in New York, or this person's located in Atlanta. And I'm like, so location.
No, it's good advice. And you mentioned Instagram, and this is another thing I talk to photographer friends about all the time. Like when you're looking, obviously, like you're saying, you discover photographers there. Do you think photographers' Instagram should be straight portfolio? Some people kind of put personal stuff, this kind of their day-to-day life, as well as portfolio pieces. Like, what do you kind of like to see when you're looking at different Instagram things? Because for me, I feel like Instagram is like the new website almost, in a sense.
I love when I see a mixture of work, personal work, and then maybe a little bit of your life, just to get a vibe.
Yep.
Sometimes when I see a portfolio, it's just about straight work. I just feel like, oh, this is your business site.
Yep.
Instagram, and then you have something personal, probably under another name. Not that there's nothing wrong with that, but then I get kind of, okay, your business, okay. But for me, I don't mind seeing a mixture of seeing of everything, because it just gives me kind of like a little flavor of like, oh, this person likes this, or oh, even if I didn't see your work, but I see you doing this, like, oh, there was a story, or this is a shoot that involves this, and I see you're like interested in this. So for me, that helps.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think, it kind of goes back to like when you have the chance to meet with people, you can kind of get a feel for like people's personalities and if you would work well together. And I think like for me, that's like an asset, like being able to like show who you are as a person. Not obviously you have to have great work, but like, if you have similar interests, whatever, it can kind of work in your favor sometimes. But I guess when you got out of SCAD, like what was kind of your first job in the photo industry? Like, I know you went on to work at different magazines, but like, what do you kind of think you're going to do? And what was kind of your first step into the photo business?
So I graduated in 2008. The year of the, it was like, oh, I'm going to do this. And then, well, I was fortunate enough where I still had a little more money in my loans. And since I was going to pay that back, I used it to go back to London. I did a study abroad in London for my BFA. So I went back to London and I worked for, or did an internship as a picture editor assistant at Ink Publishing, a custom publishing place. That's how I even found out about being a photo editor producer, because they don't teach you that. As the joke was like, if you're that, you're a failed photographer. But once I learned, I was like, oh, this is what you do. You just, make phone calls, you collaborate, you pick photographers. I was like, this is my perfect job, because I necessarily couldn't make it as a photographer because I don't like the hustle. I don't like to be like marketing myself all the time. Like, I don't like it. This is a happy medium where, okay, I could still be creative, work on a creative, and then do my own personal work for myself and not answer to anybody.
Yeah.
I always tell people especially photographers who ask me like, I see all these photo editor, producer, what you think I could do it? It's like, yes and no. Yes, it's fundamentally, you're just like, literally, it's basically production. No, you're not going to be shooting. And you have to love basically being on email, phone calls, and basically production, which I love. I found out I loved.
Yeah, it's a different type of hustle. You're hustling because
exactly. It's like a different type of hustle of trying to get the creative, completed, like get to the final point. But I love that adrenaline of like, okay, a story's been killed. Okay, we got like 2 days to shoot like 10 different portraits, subjects. Okay, let's go. Okay, I know this photographer, this photographer, this photographer. Okay, can you do it? It's like, it's, I guess, the inner editorial for people who've been in the editorial, that drive and being like, okay, we're going to get it done. It's going to get done. And
Yeah.
so from there, came home, couldn't find any really jobs because, again, there were no openings. It was a catch-22 of, we are hiring a photo assistant, but you need like 2 to 3 years of experience. And so I just started doing a lot of free internships, unfortunately, with Austin Monthly Magazine, which I love. I learned a lot. It just sucks that, I had to just do it for free to basically get an entry-level job at Southern,
Yeah.
Living Magazine.
Yeah.
And then from there, it just took on to assistant photo editor at AARP, which was great.
Wow.
And I kind of loved my journey because I didn't know when I decided to be a photo editor, I had no idea you had to be in New York or the New York hub. So I just was like figuring it out. I'm like, okay, Southern Living. And then I went to AARP learning about basically there are 2 publications. They have Newsy, the Bulletin, which I loved and I worked on the most on, and then they have their Lifestyle Celebrity, and learning those 2 different types of world of photojournalism and then like studio portraiture, celebrity photographer. So I learned and kind of, because how much can you illustrate Medicare, conceptual. That was like my introduction to conceptual photography. Then going across the country to San Francisco Magazine, a city magazine, which I loved, because you do everything. You do from food to news to fashion. That was like the first time I did fashion shoots. I never done a fashion shoot, but we did a pretty darn good job, and it was that, and that's just that learning. It's like absorbed. And I was a one-woman team with an awesome, creative team, like little creative team. And I just learned so much just being on my own and just like being thrown in and like, this worked and this didn't work,
Yeah.
And then I got sucked into the hub of tech,
yeah.
which, in San Francisco, which is a completely different like world, but had opportunities where like my first with AAR, I'm sorry, not AARP, Airbnb.
Yep.
And just learning about brand and like how they work and function. And then going to Callisto, which was more like data tech, book publishing and stuff like that. And then Square. And then now with Masterclass. So it's been a very varied career, but I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah.
Which is funny because a lot of people, every place I've gone, it's like, oh, I've been here 5 years, I've been here 7 years, and usually I haven't been no longer than like.
Yeah, I think that the age of like working at the same place your entire career is pretty much done, like almost in any career path, because it's just so much different nowadays. And I think it's probably worked to your advantage to have all these different experiences, different publications, because everyone operates differently, and now you're working on with brands versus editorial, so bouncing around, I would imagine it kind of helped your skill set.
Yeah, 100%. I think at the time, I could look back now and be like, oh, okay, this was great for me. But at the time where it was like, okay, I'm moving again, or I'm doing, it's like, but now just, I think the best example is like what we were talking before about like remote shooting. Okay, Callisto set me up for literally my next job of what I was doing.
Yeah.
So it's like, looking back, you can look back, it's easier, but when you're in it, you're like, this, why am I learning this?
Yeah, exactly.
This is why. Okay, I've done this before. All right.
Oh, definitely. I've had those jobs. Like I remember I was working at Hasbro in their studio in-house shooting toys, and I was like, I don't want to shoot toys. I hate this shit. But it's interesting to see how like e-commerce and how an internal studio works and how everything. So yeah, like you said, at the time I was like, why am I doing this? I don't even like it. But now I really appreciate it. So it's all perspective, I guess. And AARP, like how's it working there? Like, because I think they still are the #1 circulated magazine in the world. I think they have like 35 million subscribers. Actually, they shot for them last week. What do you kind of remember about working with them? Like any kind of shoots that kind of stick out as memorable for you, I guess?
I think because, and at the time I was this assistant photo editor, so I got to work on the smaller shoots. I loved working on the Bulletin. There's this section like in the news, and we could just send like literally a photographer. We would find photographers like in the Midwest, and it's like shooting these real people. And I always love that, because sometimes it can you can get away from the heart and soul of like what the publication is. But it was those little shoots that I always loved the most there. But then also, again, that was a place like I like fell in love with photojournalism, but also conceptual photography, because it was like, oh, I had no idea about that kind of genre, even at school. Like that wasn't really taught in the sense other than in fine art kind of a way. And so just like, oh, these are some amazing minds, where all I have to say is like, okay, we just want like a piggy bank or something. Give us sketches. And then they're like, oh, we could do it. And I'm like, whoa. So it was like such an amazing team. I think most of them are still there, and they're like awesome, and just learned so much from them.
Yeah. And, one thing, photographers are always kind of curious, like when you're looking for a photographer, like you said, everything's kind of regional now. You said Instagram. Are there any other places you look for when you're kind of trying to find someone for a particular project? Because there's all these different platforms like Workbook and AdEdge and a million others. But like, what are kind of some places you kind of try to find photographers if you're looking for someone for a particular project?
So if you look at my computer, my work computer, so I'll have like a whole like window kind of system with like almost all my bookmarks. So because any photographer I work with or I see that catches my eye and go to a website, I automatically bookmark. I'll generally start with, for me personally, I'll start with Diversified Photo, Women in Photography, agencies. But I've gone into some weird rabbit holes. I think right now for me is Pinterest. Like I'll just like modern this, and then I'll see something and I'll click on it. And I found photographers like that.
Oh, really?
Like, oh, and that, yeah, it's one of those magical things, because it's like, I'll like just put the search term and maybe and I'll see photographs or something. And then I'll click one. I'm like, ooh, I like that. And then I click, and then I find who shot it eventually, and then I'm like, oh, I haven't seen this photographer. So for me, it's kind of like, it's like a mixture of Google search, and then it's like, what can I find?
Pinterest, I never really used that much. I remember going on there, I was just confused about how it works, but maybe I gotta get back on there. I gotta start posting my pictures on Pinterest.
Well, it's like Pinterest is one of those magical things. It's almost like when I'm doing stock research and I'm like, I can't find this particular person on Getty or in Trunk Archive or something, and I'll just put the term in Google search, I'm not finding something, and I'll put the term in, and then I'll see a photo, and it might take me a couple of days to find the original, where it's linked to, and I'm like, oh, I can find it, maybe I can license it. It's just Pinterest for right now for me has been so magical. Right now, where it's like one of those things you can't like really, it's not like you can promote yourself on it, but it's just more like those magical holes.
Yeah, it's just kind of random.
Random.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm gonna log back in there, Karen. It sounds interesting. Another thing, are there like any common mistakes photographers make when like reaching out to editors or producers? Because anybody working freelance, you're trying as hard as you can to get on people's radar. But like, what's the best approach when you're trying to reach out to a new editor to show your work or things like that? I guess
I would say do your homework and just make sure when you're introducing to make sure that your work is reflective of kind of their style or what they're looking for. Not saying that it has to be one-to-one match, because sometimes like photographers will email like, oh, you're that nice, and even though it might not be like, for example, Masterclass style, I'll keep it apart, because you never know, I could use you down the line somewhere else for another project. I think a big no-no is emailing people by personal email, which I've had. I just immediately delete.
Oh, they like find your like your personal,
the personal email.
Damn, how they even track it down?
Yeah. So it's like, okay, unless I have personally given it to you to email something, or we have a correspondence or something, and I'm like, hey, please email it to me. When I get cold emails like that, it's just an automatic delete.
Yeah.
And I would stress to photographers, if you email like a photo editor or producer, have patience, because like we have like 10,000 things that we're doing in a day, and we may not get to your email because maybe, oh my God, this has been killed and I have to find some, a replacement. So just patience if you do email and I respond back and say, hey, I'll be back in touch shortly. Just, don't got to email you 5 times,
No.
I'll get back to you. I promise I will get back to you.
Yeah.
If it's been 2 weeks and I haven't, and just then you can politely yes.
All right. That's good. That's good advice, Yeah, and like how I was just kind of curious, like being that you went from like editorial to now you're working with like tech brands, like how is that kind of transition? Is it kind of different skill set working with a magazine versus a brand? Like how's that kind of transition for you?
I think the tough transition was going from editorial when you could just shoot things and you're not necessarily buying them out, and you could leave logos in because it's editorial versus like brand, where now I can like scan a picture now of the experience of nope. Are you paying for this Nike logo stuff? Nope.
Yep.
Nope. You gotta when you're working for the brand, you also have to shift. It's almost in the same like Southern Living. It's a brand. It has its look and feel that it sticks to, same as Airbnb, Square, Masterclass. And so you just making sure when you're producing work and bringing photographers on, they're able to be unique, but also be able to shoot to the brand. And that, and fine tuning that and being able to know when to push, when you want to kind of push a vision and when to, kind of take a step back.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously with like commercial stuff, when you're working on campaigns, there's a lot more that goes into it. It's generally bigger budgets and an editorial shoot. What are you looking for when you're hiring a photographer? Do they need to have like campaign work and advertising work to get hired? Or like what is it when you're gonna give someone an opportunity to work on one of these bigger productions? Like what do you want to see when you're gonna give them a shot, I guess?
They don't necessarily have to have campaign work, because the funny thing, here's the thing, like you come out of editorial, you think, okay, you're working for a brand, and so you're automatically thinking commercial photography. No, most of the brands are like, no, we want to shoot editorial style.
Yep.
And so I'm looking mostly like how you shoot editorial versus like commercial. It's nice that if you have worked for those brands, but basically, do you have good work?
Yeah.
And is it consistent? I think that's the number one, like, consistency that can kill like your chance, because you can have like, oh, look at these, and especially being able to edit the images on your website, because you can have like 2 good photos and then I'm seeing 5 like, ugh.
Yep.
And then what am the consistency, I can't put my faith.
Yeah.
Even though you could maybe knock it out of the park, versus if you have a good consistent portfolio. So it doesn't mean you have to be shooting all celebrities or not. Like if you shoot what you shoot badass, then I will like, oh, okay, I think I'll take a chance on you. And that's like and that's me, fighting for you when I'm presenting. Like, hey, I know this person hasn't done like much brand work, but look at what they've done here, here, and here.
Yeah.
So as long as you consistently and just hone in what you do, I think I run into a lot of photographers who try to do everything. And I'm like, that's nice, but I think, and I always just advise them, pick the few things you like and get awesome at it.
Yeah, refine it. It's like, yeah, you can't be a wedding photographer, still life photographer, portrait guy. Like,
Exactly.
There are a couple guys who can do still life and portraits. Like there's some great, like Craig Cutler's, like he's been in the game a long time, and some people can do it. It's very hard, and you have to be very like good at editing your work, I think.
But the goal is you take, say, a portrait photographer.
Yeah.
You do such an awesome job that I want to hire you to shoot food, your style.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to change how you shoot.
Yeah.
Like I like your style so much of what you do. I want to try you out. Like, hey, can you go and shoot this chef and I need food shots and stuff like that? Or can you go and shoot these rock climbers?
Yeah.
For me, if you don't, yes, you want to, of course, sometimes things you need to have like a specialist, and that is really in a thing. But I think a goal in photography is like, for me at least, like I would be like, I would say you want to get so good that I want to hire you to shoot this, and I know you don't shoot this, but I want you to shoot it in your style.
Yeah,
I'm not
definitely.
trying to change you, but I just want to shoot. I just like your style.
Yeah, no, that's great. And with advertising these days, even myself in the last few years, I've been finding myself getting hired more and more to shoot like digital content for like social media,
Mhm.
and a lot of shoots are great, good budgets and stuff too. Do you
Mhm.
find you're producing a lot more content just for social media platforms and digital stuff versus like your kind of old style of like print and whatever billboards and stuff like that?
Mm.
I guess it varies from brand to brand. I know some brands do a ton of like social media marketing and
Well, it
like
depends because I mean, like for Masterclass, I know that I'm working right now at. We do billboards, we do social. It's more that.
mhm,
So, and we do some out of home. Square maybe just a little, like those big brand campaigns, and they do out of they'll do like the out of home push, but
yep,
mostly it was like digital. Because I
yeah,
remember like I worked on this project, and then I was like, oh, it's finally on the website, and I would send it to my parents and be like, look, this is what I worked on. You can't see, and, versus like San Francisco Magazine, they would just get it every
yeah, yeah,
month
yeah,
and they could see it. So
yeah,
I think there it's a more push towards media, like digital media and those ads and those, kind of in that thing. But I don't think that the physical stuff of out of home and stuff are quite gonna go away.
no, definitely not. It's interesting. And
Mhm.
like, what kind of projects do you like working on these days? You've gotten to work on a lot of stuff, but what kind of inspires you? Like, what kind of stuff do you enjoy working on most, I guess?
I think I like working on stuff like with video or anything that's like pushing, that's like, um,
Multimedia.
I guess cross media.
Yep.
So you're having the elements of a still, but like I'm looking kind of towards the future. Like I will always enjoy fine art prints and stuff like that, but I know I'm enjoying working more in the video digital space.
Hmm.
And this eventually we will probably be in the VR world
Yeah.
of, when we're having, well, in like 100 years, if we have this conversation again, we might be like in a virtual reality and I'm
Well,
sitting next to
well,
you. You know what I
well,
mean? Stuff like that.
in the last month, all I've been hearing about is NFTs, which is like this new,
Exactly.
which is wild. It's exciting. I'm interested to see where the NFT stuff goes. I've been seeing some friends get into it. I don't know a ton about it, but yeah, like you said, you never know what's around the corner.
Yeah.
And one other thing, I guess when you're working like on these commercial projects, do you prefer to work with photographers that have reps? Does that even matter? Or I guess what's your perspective on that? Because I think a lot of photographers, they think like, do I need to have a rep to get this type of work? Or it's
No,
yeah.
because I'm literally like I signed two different projects,
Hmm.
and one has a rep and one doesn't.
Yeah,
One
yeah,
was like, here's my whole bill, like put these people on here, and one was like, here's an email. This is what I, you know what I mean?
yeah.
So I don't think what matters is you have to have great work.
Hmm.
Good, consistent work will get you hired no matter what.
Yep.
Reps will help you get the bigger jobs and get you paid. But if you're just by yourself, you can do that too as well.
Yeah.
Because I worked with someone and they got themselves paid and they were by themselves and they don't have to cut that.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
right. Keep
with the
that
rep,
30%.
they're getting paid and they're gonna get, what they,
Yep.
because they're working, so have good work. That's what ultimately matters because I hire people, like I said, with and without.
Yeah,
It all
definitely.
just comes down to the work.
100%. And another thing, treatments. I've been finding like, especially with the advertising stuff, that it's becoming more and more people request it. Like, how important are the treatments? Like, what do you like to see in a treatment when photographers submit these for different projects, I guess?
Um, Usually, so I try to be careful or just like alert my team or people I'm working with. Like, I don't want to go into the treatment phase
Hmm.
until we are kind of like locked. We're working together because I don't want people to be doing stuff for free and then we don't use. You know what I mean? So once we're kind of locked in, that's when I start like asking for treatments. And usually I'm like, okay, this is my idea.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be stupid and dumb. You can tell me if this is going to work. Y'all are the professionals. You tell me, you come back to me and wow me. Like, this is my little idea I was thinking.
Yep.
And then I will be like, I would be like, do the safe and then go crazy. And then
Okay.
you meet in the middle.
I like it. I like
you know?
it.
Well, it's just in general. I always tell photographers when they go and shoot, I'm like, hey, look, you got to shoot these meat and bone potato images. Okay. I know they're boring. But once you do the safe shot, then go out and do work that makes the editor want to choose that versus what they thought they want.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at treatments, I'm like, give me the safe to present, but then also go balls to the wall.
Yeah.
Usually, most of the time, it comes in the middle of it.
No, that's good advice. And another thing, I guess, in terms of like estimating for jobs, are there like any common mistakes photographers make when submitting estimates? Like, obviously, photographers, everyone wants to get the job. Are there certain situations where, you know, someone can have great work, but then their estimate comes in super low and it can kind of be a red flag? Or like, are there any kind of common mistakes people make when putting their estimates together?
I would say most common that I see, they under.
Yep.
They under. And as usually, just like, as a photographer, you're not going to say how much, I'm going to go, or, you're making, with budgets. It's like, it is a sensitive thing, but the thing I do advocate and try to get people as paid as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always say, it's like, if you come in super high, the answer you can get is no. And then you can be like, what do we need to do? What number do we need to get under? So, I think the common one I always see is like people come super under, but I understand because you don't want to scare it. It's almost like when applying for a job and you're like in a salary negotiation, you're like, oh, we really want to work here. You don't want to tip it.
Yep.
But just know your value. If you're doing great work, you will get paid.
Definitely. Because I think early on in my career, I tried to like, because obviously you're hungry, you want to get your foot in the door, and you try to like, I remember like trying to like just take line items off. I'm like, oh, I could get away with not using that, but then I realized like you're only hurting yourself at the end of the day because you want the product to be good. So it's like you're saying, like, do the estimate what it's going to cost you to put the best work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then they will, if they want to work with you, mostly they will work. It's a conversation. Just don't think it, unfortunately, sometimes it's like a hard no. And then, depending on the company, but most companies, like everyone I work, they usually work with you. They're like, we want to work with you. Hey,
yeah,
this is a little high. We need to kind of get it into this range.
Yeah.
What can we do? It's usually a conversation. So don't fear. Usually people are willing to work with you, and I will just say flat out like, hey, look, this is our budget. Like if it's like going like way sky high, I'm like, and we want to work with you, and it's like, okay, if you can't negotiate or have any wiggle room, I understand you have to walk away. If it doesn't make sense, but like at the end of the day, my job is to make sure we're on budget. Because like that's like our job is to make sure we're 100%. Managing the funds that we are allotted, stuff like that. So that's why my advice is like, just know it's usually if they want to work with you, it's a conversation, and don't undercut yourself. Because trust me, I did a lot of free internships because I was only because I had to get the names on to get a chance, But don't ever undersell yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Because at the end of the day, these brands and whatever product or service they're advertising, they want their product to be portrayed in a good light and do good work. So it's like, yeah. No, so that's great advice. I appreciate it. I was interested in talking to you. I checked out your photography website. I was interested in talking to you about your project, Elegant Wasteland. I know you kind of mentioned you like doing landscapes and stuff. I was just kind of curious a little bit about that project, like where you shot it and what it was kind of all about for you.
So that was like my thesis. It's one of my favorite ones I've done, and I've done kind of like spurts of that. But this was shot in the South. Like this is the time when I was in Savannah, Atlanta, and then I lived in San Antonio at the time.
Yeah.
And my grandparents lived in Birmingham. And so it's like on that kind of corridor of like San Antonio, like 10,
Yep.
like I-10, kind of that in the south. And I just started really noticing, and this was the times of like, malls and Kmart was, and I just started noticing they would just sit there every day and you would just drive by. But
This
then
was my favorite right here.
Yeah, that was a Kmart on I-35 or 410 in San Antonio. And I just started seeing the beauty of the massive space and the structure, but then the waste of, like, back then, this was like late 2000s. Well, we talk about the homeless and we talk about people not having good schools. So why can't we not use these buildings?
Yeah.
Why can't we not retrofit that or something into something that's useful? So that's kind of that's what spawned when I would just see these buildings, the beauty, and also kind of like, I would say kind of like a Walker Evan-ish kind of vibe a little bit. But again, I would see them like sitting there and it's like, you could use that space, but yet it's just sitting there empty and desolate.
Yeah.
Like that could be used, you could retrofit that maybe and get like a few like apartments in that and house like low income housing.
Definitely.
Or something, or a youth center, or
Yeah.
things to help the community.
Yeah, man.
But because it's like, I guess, private, it's all about money and profit, what can we do?
Especially in California where you live. Last time I went there a year ago, the homeless, it's terrible out there. You walk in LA or San Francisco, you walk down the sidewalk, it's just like tent city. So yeah, you're right. There is just so much space and opportunity to use this stuff. I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but yeah, it is definitely a problem.
And
And
then just my love of like this building architecture as well. So it's this kind of this weird beauty but sadness in a sense, because it's like, and then you notice like, most of these things are probably tore down by now. I haven't had a chance to go back, but yeah, that was kind of just at the time when I was photographing.
no, that's awesome. I really enjoyed the work. And also, I look at your LinkedIn, I saw you've been part of something called Coffee 3, I believe it's called, for like 13 years. I was curious, like, what that is and like what you're
So,
kind of.
so what I liked, after last year's event of George Floyd, there was a movement, to get people noticed for being a person of color.
Yep.
Noticed and recognized in like the creative and marketing fields. So Coffee, this is this organization you can put, and so it's like kind of like a signal or quotes and are like, hey, person of color and marketing creative. If you go into their thing and on LinkedIn, you can find out a little bit more information. So I just put that because for me, it's few and far between of a Black female in publishing or in the creative space, and especially being a photo producer.
Definitely.
And so just letting people know, hey, I'm available, or for people to reach out and it's like, hey, how do I break in? If you're like just wondering how to navigate. Again, I'm all about now kind of paving it forward and making it less difficult or like confusing of I just had to pick it up and go, and not being able to have access to mentors of color or seeing people in management of color where I went. So now just joining the cause and, just trying to do what I can do.
No, that's amazing. It's really important, and yeah, I think like yeah, it's important to have different people, diverse group of people, and it's just, you're gonna do better work, and it's giving people opportunities. I know some of my friends like are people of color, and in the last year, I know Diversify Photo, which is a great organization, and you mentioned it earlier. I guess what's like your kind of perspective in the last year, like you said, with all the George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, from your perspective in this business, do you think? Has there been progress? Has there been an open more conversation with the organizations and people and I guess your work, I guess?
I think there's been progress. I mean, after the initial of, hey, Black Lives Matter, we're hiring a Black, diversity, inclusion officer, I truly believe the the organizations, they are making steps forward, understanding it's not going to happen overnight, as this has like been a systemic problem and it's still. And to my fellow, for this week of Asian Pacific, friends, we're seeing hate still, and racism happen. And so we're taking small steps forward. And I think for me, the turning point was like, wow, something has actually happened when Mississippi finally took off the Confederate flag off their flag, national, state flag. And I'm like, whoa, it took that, because it wasn't just the monuments, but when someone is like, whoa, you're telling me, or when NASCAR banned, the day I thought you would ever even see that. And that's like, okay, I feel like there is a shift. It's not going to happen overnight. So in companies, I do feel like it is movement, but I'm not going to see like a C-suite of all people of color like tomorrow. No. I'm realistic, but hopefully for me, I just want to be part of the solution and not like more of the problem. So how can I help? How can I advocate?
Yeah, no, it's important, and I appreciate it. And I guess like you said, you've done a lot in this business. You've gotten to work on a lot of different stuff, but like what's kind of got you inspired now? Like anything you're hoping to work on, or like what's next for you, Karen?
I think what's next for me is seeing how I can give back. Like, how can I use the skills that I know to help people who either want to be in this business or are somehow related in this business? How can I get a seat at the table to let more opportunities, arise?
Yeah.
Because again, like I said, there's few and far in between jobs or people of color that have. The problem is, I always say, is when people came to me in the photography community and asking like, how can we help? And I always say, help with resources.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, like in low income communities, photography is expensive. Yes, you can pick up a camera and you can learn, and that's what a lot of people do. But you only see them in kind of like photojournalism, maybe environmental portraiture land. Once you get into food photography or fashion photography, that costs money. Food styles, equipment, studio rentals. All the. You're not saying you have to have all the most expensive gears, but just to have a basic kit.
Yep.
And people just don't have that. So how can I, advocate to get resources to people to be able to have the opportunity if they want to join this field? Or how can I advocate to get more people into the field who are trying?
Yeah.
And like, hey, they're, unfortunately, people are staying in jobs longer, but how can we start kind of being more inclusive and getting those different voices? Again, I'm seeing it slowly, but we don't want to swing the pendulum that we're like, oh, now it's all just people of color and no like white. No, we want to get to the point where you go into the office and you just feel like it's the world, and it doesn't, like, there's nothing off-putting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just giving people an opportunity, because like you said, like earlier in the interview, like when you're in school, like you didn't even know like photo editor or producer is a job. So if like people don't even know these are like opportunities that are out there, because there's so many jobs within photography that aren't even shooting, as it's like being a stylist, being a producer, like whatever, doing like catering, or there's so many jobs, and it's like, so if like any way we can help and let people know there's these opportunities out there. But
just like and just like I'm learning in Masterclass, like on the film and video side, it's like you don't have to be the director.
No.
There's so many things, and some people find their jams. Like, I want to be an editor.
Yeah,
that's your jam. Like, what I mean? Or I want to do this, like motion graphics, or like, and exactly to all what you said. It's like there's so many things you can be a photographer, but I think we're all seeing like, let's be a photographer. No, there's so many different things within photography that you could like work it. Because I think for another long time, I wanted to do, if I wasn't what I'm doing, is be a photographer curator at a museum.
Yep.
That's still part of creative and still part of photography. I just I didn't go that path, but that was like another thing I was thinking about. That's not me being an actual photographer, but I'm still in photography.
Yep. No, definitely. Well, Karen, I'm glad we connected. I really appreciate you taking the time. It was great talking to you, just because you have so much experience in the business. And just can't thank you enough.
Thank you so much for having me.
So there you have it. That was the Karen Williams interview. I just want to thank Karen so much for taking the time to come on the podcast. It was a real pleasure talking to her about her journey with photography and everything she's kind of worked on within her career so far. She's worked at some amazing brands and publications like AARP and AirBnB, as I mentioned. And always just a pleasure talking to someone who's, on the production side and hires photographers. I really appreciate her insight and advice to, photographers when marketing your work to these different brands and publications. I know I learned a lot, so I can't thank her enough. And as always, I'll be having weekly podcasts every week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, as well as the Photo Banter YouTube page. So definitely go check us out on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button, as it'd be much appreciated. And thanks so much for listening, and take care.